If you've ever felt like God is calling you to move, but your feet feel like lead, you're caught in something that ancient Hebrews called vayit mama. Today we're looking at how to break that inertia. But first, who remembers the game Seek? Right? Looking at the demographics on my channel, it must be quite a few of you. I played this once in my ward when I was younger and I loved it. So eventually I found a copy on eBay and got it for myself. Well, in each of my Come Follow Me videos that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to ask you a question from that game. And here's the one for today. It's from the Old Testament. It's not directly related to our reading this week, but it's an Old Testament one. So, and it's worth 15 points. What should we do to receive the promise that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee? So, leave your answer in the comments and I'll give you the answer towards the end of the video. We're diving into some fascinating principles today that I found in our Come Follow Me reading of Genesis 18:23. So with all that being said, let us arise and go up into the text. Now there's an immediate contrast in the text between urgency and inertia, and to see it you've got to look at the verbs. In Genesis 18, Abraham is sitting by his tent in the heat of the day. Now there's an apocryphal story as a build-up to this setting where Abraham's there and it's hot, right? It's the heat of the day, it's described in the Bible. And he's so concerned that somebody could be wandering around in the plains of Mamre and around his environment that he goes out looking for this potential somebody who could be struggling, who would need water, who would need feeding, who would need taking care of in this extreme weather. And he goes out looking and he doesn't find anybody. And so he makes his way back to his tent, back to Sarai. And he's there when it's at this moment that the three messengers appear to him, the Lord and two angels, two messengers. Now, from that point, he's rushed about all the way in the heat of the day. And the text doesn't say that Abraham then casually gets up and greets them. He hurried into the tent to Sarah. He ran to the herd to get a calf. He's flying around. And when you're spiritually tuned in like Abraham is, and you recognize holiness, inertia becomes impossible. It's a physical reaction that becomes immediate motion. And there's a key detail here that's so easy to gloss over, where Abraham tells Sarah to use specific flour, soleth, to bake the cakes. And in Hebrew, this translates as choice semolina, but it's actually proto-temple language. So it's the temple in what we understand it later in the Old Testament when Solomon eventually builds it, and the tabernacle given to Moses. This is before that time, obviously, so it's proto-temple. And this is the specific grade of flour, this choice semolina, this soleth, later required for the meal offering for the law in the law of Moses. So Abraham wasn't just making lunch for three random blokes. He was performing a high priestly service at this point. He recognized the divinity in the visit, and his response was to turn his tent, his home, into a temple instantly. So this episode with Abraham teaches me two things. First, be proactive. Look for those who might need your help. Be aware, awake, and arise, as the scriptures might say, and run to them. See the divinity in everyone. And second, we really need to turn our homes into mini temples, places where God can visit us and dwell. You know, our homes are we're to try and get our homes to be sacred only, second to the temple, right? And we need to do things and be worthy of that. Let's go on and contrast that with Lot in Genesis 19. And the stakes couldn't be higher. Sodom is literally about to be destroyed. Just before we get into chapter 19, we've got this whole interplay with Abraham and the Lord as the two messengers go off to Sodom. And they're having this back and forth, aren't they, where the Lord's about to destroy Sodom and Abraham's, you wouldn't destroy the city for 50 people, would you? And the Lord's like, no, I guess not. You know, I guess I won't destroy Sodom for the sake of 50 righteous people. And I think at this point, Abraham's thinking, I don't think there are 50 righteous people. Right, what about for 5 less? What about for 45? The Lord's like, no, 45. All the way down, and I'm sure Abraham's probably thinking, I don't know if anyone's righteous down there. Let's try 10. So he whittles the Lord down to 10. And the Lord is willing to grant Abraham this. And so we have this whole interplay where Abraham and the Lord are discussing the worth of souls, effectively, right? Righteous souls. The Lord would not destroy people, a city, without warning them first. And I'm sure there must have been an instance, or many instances, of the Lord trying to intervene and trying to warn the people of Sodom to change their ways. And it's got to the point where they're not. And so this event needs to happen, right? So Sodom is literally about to be destroyed, and the two messengers have gone down and they find Lot. Did Lot recognize the divinity of these two angels? I wonder. Now, they warn him that the city is about to be destroyed, but the text says that Lot lingered. Your city is about to be destroyed and you're lingering, right? And here's the word that we talked about earlier from ancient Hebrew, vayit mama, right? And the JPS commentary, the Jewish Publication Society commentary, describes the meaning of vayit mama as a zigzagging determination. Think of it as someone who's pacing back and forth. They know they should leave, but in Lot's case, he's tethered to the spot. He's rooted. He's made his roots in Sodom, and he's dilly-dallying. He's just caught in two minds, despite knowing his city is about to be destroyed, right? And we see this progression in Lot, where at first he's with Abraham. Things are getting a bit touchy between their different groups, aren't they? They can't where to feed, where to have sheep and all of that kind of stuff, and where they can graze. And Abraham gets Lot to choose where he wants to go, and Abraham will go the other way to maintain space, to maintain family relationships. And Lot chooses the more fertile grounds of the plains of Jordan. And he gets there, and Lot pitches his tent towards Sodom. And in between these two stories, these two events, Lot has gone from pitching his tent towards Sodom to living in Sodom. He's in the thick of this place. And now he can't either escape or is unwilling to, despite the impending doom. There's this huge contrast between Abraham and Lot already, because Abraham runs because he has moral autonomy up on the heights of Hebron. He can breathe. He's got all of this stuff that he can do willingly, whereas Lot zigzags. He keeps experiencing vayit mama because he's an alien in this sunken plain, bound by his environment. He's totally captured by his environment. And because he zigzags, the angels have to physically grab Lot's hand. And this is the definition of the difference between an agent who acts and an agent who is acted upon, as we read on in 2 Nephi. And Elder Bednar constantly talks about this concept of being agents who act and objects to be acted upon. And as the lectures on faith teach, Lot lacked mental exertion to override his environment. He didn't have the strength. He didn't have the willingness to avoid destruction. He's stuck. He's experiencing vayit mama. And Lot's so passive that he's just an object of mercy rather than an active participant in his own deliverance. And to certain extents, we're all objects of mercy, but we can choose whether to be active participants like Abraham, or we are just have to be taken by the hand and grabbed and yanked out of there, right? And the problem is, we all experience that mercy in various ways, but our reactions, our participation within that mercy, that willingness to receive the mercy or have it forced upon us, carries on down the line, because Lot, despite receiving that act of mercy, doesn't change. He's still, when he comes to bargain with the messengers, they're telling him, right, get out of here, get up onto the high hills and all of that. And he's like, no, go to this town. Okay, go to this town. You know, they're desperate, and he's still prevaricating, he's still procrastinating. All of this mercy that he's been given and afforded, he never quite makes it. You know, his actions, his choices, his unwillingness, his vayit mama, lead on to terrible consequences. You know, the story of his daughters sleeping with him because they think the world has been destroyed. They've seen their world destroyed, and so they make this calamitous decision to sleep with their father to raise offspring because they think they're the beginning of humanity again. They've just seen this destruction. Whereas if Lot had followed the messengers, he'd be up on the plain, up on the hill of Hebron again with Abraham, and that whole instance wouldn't happen. So there's a lot that comes with us receiving mercy and being participants within that mercy. What do we linger on in our lives which hold us captive to the world? What are we unwilling to escape from and instantly display that vayit mama even when God is taking us by the hand? How can we change from an attitude of Lot to an attitude of Abraham? Because this brings me on to another Hebrew word, Hineni. Now, Hineni, it means here I am, here am I, as it gets translated backwards and forwards. But it's not like casually answering a friend who's asked where you are. Scott, where are you? Here I am. No. It expresses an attitude of total attentiveness. It's essentially a blank check signed to God for him to request anything of us and that we will do willingly. Abraham uses Hineni 3 times during the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. He says it to God, he says it to his son, and he says it to the angel. He isn't distracted or zigzagging mentally like Lot with the vayit mama concept. Abraham is completely dialed in. The lectures on faith make a bold statement about this kind of attitude. A religion that doesn't require the sacrifice of all things never has power sufficient to produce saving faith. Hineni is the vocalization of all things. Contrast that with the counterfeit Hineni that we find out there with the premortal council. Satan said, "Behold, here am I, Hineni, send me." But he added his own conditions. He wanted the glory. He wanted the control. That's transactional. That's transactional Hineni. The true Hineni is being an apprentice, yielding to the master. As always, Jesus is the perfect exemplar of this when he, in that very same Grand Council, said, "Here am I, send me," with no conditions. It was unconditional. "Father, thy will be done, and the glory be thine forever." Completely different. And that's who we need to be more like. So are you willing to answer Hineni, "Here am I," when the Lord calls you to sacrifice all things for him? Listen out for the Lord today and respond with, "Here am I," and sacrifice one thing, and watch the Lord bless you and your faith increase. But here's the thing, you don't just arrive at this full concept of the Saviour's Hineni, "Here am I." The degrees at which we reach them and which we can profess them are going to be slightly different. So we're not going to get there overnight. We're not going to be perfect. These things are incremental steps. And for Abraham, this attitude was built over a lifetime of 3 specific altars. Think of it as that progression of power. So first we have the altar of delivery in Chaldea, where Abraham was the victim of the priest Elkanah that we have in the Hierocephalus, is that what they're called? In Abraham, in the book of Abraham. And there, Abraham learned that God is a deliverer. And then we have what we can call the altar of presence at Moriah. This time, roles are reversed. Abraham is the one wielding the knife, and he learns that faith requires this 3-day journey. "Abraham, I need you to kill your son." "Whatever you say, Lord. Here I am, Hineni." Now you've got 3 days to cool off that initial reaction. 3 days of taking your son, who you're about to kill for God, and you've got that time to think about, is this really what you're going to do? It's sober, it's steady, and not just that emotional rush of just being, Hineni, here I am, I'll do it. Okay, cool off for 3 days. Are you still going to do it? This gives Abraham an unquestionable power that he will be able to come to be able to do that. And that brings us to the altar of power, the cross. This is where it all leads. Abraham was essentially acting out the Father's role in the infinite sacrifice of Christ. Now, every sacrifice you're asked to make is just another stone on one of these altars in your life. It isn't subtraction, it's a step closer to becoming more like God. But the difference between Abraham and Lot that we've seen is the difference between power and hope. Despite his lingering, Lot has hope that he'll escape. He needs force, he needs coercion, he needs to be made to do it. And because of that, he has no power. Abraham uses his agency, says Hineni, and gains greater capacity. And we often view sacrifice as subtraction, as losing time, money, or comfort. But through these examples, we see sacrifice as an addition. It's how you add God's own power to your soul. And I want to leave you with one tiny detail. So in Genesis 22, it notes that Abraham built the altar before he placed the wood. Structure first, then fuel. How often are we waiting for the fire to fall, for waiting for that spiritual power, before we've even built the structure to receive it? We try to burn the wood on the bare ground and wonder why nothing ever happens, or it's not as powerful as it could be. Now the structure, the Hineni, the urgency, the soleth, the covenants we make and keep, that's what's required for the sacrifice to be valid. So as you go about your week, I invite you to ask yourself, are you running? Are you running towards God? Or are you zigzagging? And have you built the altar? Now, if you want to see my full study on Hineni, I've put the deep dive over on my Substack. The link's in the description. Come and join the conversation over there. And finally, the answer to the quiz question. So, the question was, what should we do to receive the promise that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee? Answer, honour thy father and thy mother. We could tie that into this story, can't we, with Isaac. He honoured his father and his mother in his role in the Akedah, in the binding. Remember, build the altar first, and I'll see you next week. If you want to understand more about how these ancient mechanics translate into modern revelation, you'll want to watch this video next. I'll see you over there.